Wake up, everybody. Welcome into Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media does not. We also uncover all of the propaganda and the lies that the mainstream media is spinning on us. And we are going to deep dive a lot of stories making the news today. We're going to cover NATO telling Europe to prepare for war. This is all coming as President Trump, of course, is calling for peace agreements. And we now know that Zelensky in Ukraine has turned down a peace agreement from the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. They are gearing up, and we just got word just a few minutes ago, thanks to one of our super chatters here just a minute ago, pointing out to the Times of Israel that Israel is planning on preparations for attacks on nuclear facilities inside of Iran. So this is all happening about, 38 days until President-elect Trump becomes president of the United States once again.
And the FBI has investigated itself around January 6th. It is no longer conspiracy that the FBI had informants. They admitted as such. They also admitted that they lied to Congress. How the hell are we supposed to feel about this?
So, are they allowed to do that?
They investigated themselves. They say there were some mistakes, but everything is fine. They lied before, but they're not lying now. I don't know what to do with this information other than to say, well, it's no longer conspiracy that the FBI had informants. We can at least run with that. The rest of it makes me mad as snakes. I'm incredulous about it, and we're going to go through it together.
Yeah, we are. And also, Al-Qaeda is being rebranded as our friends. They are our friends now. The very people that Americans...
I don't have other friends that cut my head off. Do you?
I don't. But you better start embracing Al-Qaeda.
Not anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean... You should start embracing them. Al-Qaeda is our friends, right? Yes, Americans died fighting them. There are American veterans who have missing limbs and arms and legs and have PTSD and who lost their lives fighting Al-Qaeda. But now the Biden administration really wants you to love them. So we're going to talk about that.
Plus the media bending the knee to Donald Trump. This is not what we wanted. We just wanted truth all along. So now they're making some sort of mea culpa without an actual apology. I'm not feeling very forgiving about it. You decide how you feel about it, but we're going to go through how all of a sudden Donald Trump is Person of the Year for 2024 for Time Magazine, how they've decided to change their tone. We decide how we feel about it because, as Elon Musk says, we're the media now.
We are, and let us know where you're joining us from. Thank you guys for joining us on this Thursday. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. We are live streaming on YouTube, streaming on Rumble, streaming on X. So thank you guys for joining us here and being a part of our show. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to get to all of this news in just a second. But first,
I got to get out of my piss mood and tell you about our show sponsor because I'm just mad about the news today. So let me get unmad and tell you about something that's nice, which is that Shopify sponsors Redacted, which is independent media, and we try our best to be as truthful as possible. And so we appreciate our show sponsors very much, like Shopify. Now, did you know that Shopify is the place for you to go to become independent and launch your own store, your own business to the world? You can own your own career. So whatever idea you have, you can start it at Shopify. Go to shopify.com/redacted and get everything you need to grow your business. They can teach you how to sell something, how to present yourself beautifully on the internet, how to make your first sale, how to make your millionth sale. They support you all along the way so that you don't have to learn web design and e-commerce and whatnot. And in fact, the Redacted store runs on Shopify. You could find that on redactedstore.com and see that it's beautiful. Shopify makes sure everything you put forward is beautiful, and we really appreciate them. So sign up for a 1-month trial right now for free at shopify.com/redacted. You don't have anything to risk and everything to gain. We really appreciate them. Once more, that's shopify.com/redacted. And that ad put me in a better mood. I don't want to be in a good mood. I want to be in a bad mood. I'm pissed today, Clayton.
Well, get angry because we start with some breaking news now. ABC News is now confirming what we've been reporting for months here on the show. Way to catch up, ABC News, because our numbers from our sources were telling us that this, in fact, was the case, that yes, 1 million Ukrainian soldiers have now died in this 2.5-year-old war. This is unbelievable that the mainstream media is now acknowledging this. Of course, even President Trump the other day kind of floated a number. I think he said like 400,000. I don't know who was giving him those numbers. 1 million That to me is a conservative number. I think the numbers that we're hearing here at Redacted are closer to 1.2 million soldiers dead in Ukraine. An entire generation of young men, of middle-aged men wiped out in the country of Ukraine, all because the West has pushed this country into a proxy war against Russia. And you can thank your NATO overlords for all of this, you sons of bitches. Absolutely awful that the entire country has been destroyed because of the whims of the military-industrial complex and these Western leaders. Make peace now, you fools, as our friend Colonel Douglas McGregor likes to say. But they won't. In fact, they're moving in the opposite direction today. This very day, they're doing it. In fact, they struck Russia, Ukraine did, using U.S. ATACMS long-range weapons early this morning, striking deep into the heart of Russia. These are U.S.-made ATACMS, long-range ballistic missiles, and they were directed at the military airfield in Taganrog in southern Russia. Now, they were shot down, according to Russia. They even have like an electronic fencing system that basically just knocked them out of the sky. Hey, maybe we could use those in New Jersey for all of these freaking drones.
Thinking the same thing.
They could just shoot down.
We don't got nothing like that.
We could just shoot down. They could just shoot down and like use this electronic fencing mechanism that just knocks these massive U.S. ATACMS long-range missiles right out of the sky. Yeah, and you want to go to war with Russia, you morons? Like, that's how it's going to go for you if you try to right now. So they were shot down, but Russia says, get ready because we're going to respond, and a NATO country could be next. Remember when Russian President Medvedev, though, recently said that deep state forces would try to kill Trump if he tries to stop the war in Ukraine? I mean, they've multiple assassination attempts against Trump already. Well, Trump today doubled down on his peace plan. So, like, Trump's like, hey, all right, I'm not going to back down from this. I'm calling for an end to World War III, saying we need to do everything we can to stop World War III. The deep state doesn't like that. And the Mockingbird media is already saying, of course, that Trump has to go to war and it will be his to lose. Remember this headline from the other day? Oh, no, this was today. World War III may not be far off. Hello, it's already here. Okay, it may not be far off. It's here. You're literally attacking Russia using U.S. weapons. Israel about to attack nuclear facilities in Iran.
What is
Wake
that
up.
image? He's called for peace.
And no, they show Trump as like
he wants to bite them and he wants a war.
Like friendly Putin, friendly Xi Jinping, and then Trump's in the back like the madman that he is. He's calling for peace.
He's literally called for diplomacy with both leaders.
Here was this headline from The Hill. World War III is now Trump's to lose. That was just before Thanksgiving. I love that. Well, the deep state NATO forces now are doing whatever they can to keep this war going and stopping Trump. And today, NATO's head, Mark Rutte, who destroyed, of course, the Netherlands, by the way.
As Ralph Scholhammer, a friend of the show, says he failed up like most of these globalists did. Right. He literally was voted out of the leadership in the Netherlands, so he was able to fail up into a head NATO.
That's how these people do it, right? So today, NATO's head, Mark Rutte, told Europe to prepare for World War III. He's telling Europe, get ready. We need to have a wartime economy and a wartime defense plan footing. Rutte just this morning said this. Watch.
We can prevent the next big war on NATO territory and preserve our way of life. This requires us all to be faster and fiercer. It is time to shift to a wartime mindset and turbocharge our defense production and defense spending.
Turbocharge it, because it's not turbocharged already? I mean, are you kidding me? Yesterday, the United States Congress approved the National Defense Authorization Act. Massive, massive amounts of military spending. And of course, this is a direct insult to President Trump, who's now talking about, you guys need to pay your fair share. The United States is not going to foot the bill for this. And we need to maybe, and there's definitely people inside the Trump administration that want us to end NATO or leave NATO altogether.
But no, he said Europeans need to volunteer their pensions. They're not paying enough for this war. He is in Europe. I guess he doesn't have eyes to see how much the average European is hurting because this war has already tanked their economy. But no, he says Europeans need to shell out more. It needs to become more expensive for them. All right for some, isn't it, to be able to say that?
Speaking of the Netherlands, take a look at the... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just real quick, like all of the weapons that Europe is sending into Ukraine, like all these European countries, there are, what is he talking about? Prepare for World War III. You're in it. You're contributing. Yes. Like,
right.
You can't call it that yet, though. They're waiting. It's like they're waiting to call it that. Mm-hmm. They're waiting for like the big moment when everything changes. Like they keep playing with fire like this. And there's going to be that tipping point moment, that tipping point explosion that happens. Maybe it's another Nord Stream pipeline destruction or something, some moment that is going to, then that label then is put in place permanently. Because we're already there. You and I know it. We've all been covering it. We know it. But they'll finally label it that. But take a look at these tweets here. I thought this was perfect. These warmongers need to be arrested, Liberacat says, persecuted and removed from power. All they want to do is spend taxpayer dollars, funnel it to all of their pockets while our people die and suffer from their greed as a result. Enough is enough. And Eva Vardelingerbroek, who is from the Netherlands, of course.
Way to go on that last name.
I nailed it. I think I did
there was an L in there that's not.
I flowed the V and the L together.
Okay.
Vlardinglerbroek. Yeah, there we go. So Eva, she's a great journalist in the Netherlands, and she knows Mark Rutte very well. She says, agreed. Mark Rutte is a disgrace. He ruined our country and is dead set on now ruining the rest of the world, dragging us all into war. He has nothing to lose, nothing to pass on, since he has no kids, no wife, no family. All he cares about is staying in power. Ouch.
I didn't know that. Ouch. Is he a bachelor, really?
No wife, no family. All he cares about is staying in power. Ooh, you should fear those people. Meanwhile, the deep state at the Pentagon is working overtime to undermine Trump with propaganda now about Russia. So this out today in the Associated Press. U.S. is now warning Russia may be ready to use new lethal missiles against Ukraine again in coming days. So, we're just moments away here. Will it be Christmas Day? Who knows at this point? Like all of this, you guys are awake and aware of what they're trying to do to President Trump before he takes office on January 20th. And the Pentagon warned yesterday that Russia could soon launch one of its new intermediate range ballistic missiles, not just the short range missiles, but the new intermediate ones against Ukraine on Wednesday. They warned, claiming the concern stems from a new intelligence report that is not publicly available. So the AP has access to this because, of course, the Associated Press is an extension of the intelligence state in the United States, just like the New York Times and the Washington Post. You want to hand over that information. The intelligence community runs back and forth between those companies. They're just extensions of it. So this new intelligence report is not publicly available, but the Associated Press has it, and they're letting you know ahead of time that this is about to happen. So Russia is about to use massive amounts of long or medium range intermediate missiles into Ukraine, the likes of which we haven't seen before. And Mark Rutte telling Europe, get on a war footing because we're ready. You need to be prepared, and we need to ramp up defense and military spending right now to go up against Russia. Now, the Biden administration is pushing Ukraine as much support as it can before it's trying to leave office, dumping billions of dollars into them as possible before they leave. In fact, the White House just approved another massive multi-billion-dollar loan this week. And today we got word from the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, that he said that he proposed the idea of Ukraine and Russia establishing a Christmas truce, but it was rejected by Ukrainian President Zelensky, a.k.a. the CIA, because Zelensky doesn't do anything without the CIA puppets running the show. He said at the end of the Hungarian EU presidency, we made new efforts for peace. We proposed a Christmas ceasefire and a large-scale prisoner exchange. But Zelensky rejected it and ruled this out today. We did what we could. So all of the chips are laid down right now. We did what we could. We tried for peace. The AP and the intelligence community is warning us that Russia is about to launch a massive attack. All of the pieces are in place now as they try to completely undermine Trump right before he takes office on January 20th. Let us know your thoughts on that.
Well, a bombshell new report from the Inspector General was just released about the FBI's role in January 6th, and it does, in fact, show that the FBI had informants in the crowd. That is no longer a conspiracy theory. So another point for conspiracy knowers. In fact, on redactedstore.com, we have a T-shirt that says conspiracy knower. One of the things that it lists on the back is January 6th. we're right about that again. Yes, the FBI did, in fact, have informants in the crowd. What did they do? We don't know. This is a report from the Justice Department's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz. It is the government investigating itself. Let's be clear about that. But it says there were not FBI agents. There were informants. Also, they admit that they lied to Congress about it. So if we could just drop that for a second, I want to make this point. How do we know that they're not lying now? This is a report about, this is the government investigating the government saying we lied before. How do we know they're not lying now? How are we supposed to feel about this? At the very least, we know that one conspiracy was true. But what can we trust here? It's upsetting. I'm pissed about it because I've been reading it all morning. Go ahead, Clayton.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, just to be clear, the Department of Justice, which runs, of course, the FBI, did this report and investigated itself. And in this report, they say, yes, we did lie to Congress. Yes, there were not FBI agents there. There were FBI informants, all of which was lied to in front of Congress, before Congress, under oath by Christopher Wray and others, in front of members of Congress who asked them those very questions. Yeah. Agents, informants, no.
That was all a lie, but this is on the up and up. That's what we're supposed to take away from this. How can we do that in good faith? So, of course, the FBI is allowed to lie to us, the people. Are they allowed to lie to Congress now that they've just admitted it? So let's take a look before we get too riled up and I start screaming at my husband. Sorry, honey, it's not your fault. Okay, I know, but when I get mad, I sometimes yell at Clayton nonsensically.
I'm the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
That's why I always say every man needs a man cave. Okay. A place to go and hide.
So here's how if we could just go back to the first one, the one right before that, here's how they make the distinction between agents and informants. It says, we found no evidence in the materials reviewed or the testimony showing or suggesting that the FBI had undercover employees at the crowd on January 6th. But then it goes on to say, okay, so no employees, but they did have what they call CHSs. What they mean by that is confidential human sources or informants. We can use that word. And what they mean here when they say WHO is the Washington field office. So they determined that there were 26 human sources at January 6th in connection with the events. 4 entered the Capitol. 13 entered restricted areas around the Capitol, which was a secured perimeter. 9 neither entered a restricted area or the Capitol or had any other illegal activity. None of them were prosecuted. That's weird, right? They were doing something that other people have been prosecuted for, but since they're informants, they weren't. It says the Washington field office did not know that a total of 26 of them would be there because only 4 field offices had informed the Washington field office or FBI headquarters that they had these relevant people there. So they had informants that happened to be there. A few of them did give them some warnings about possible violence. A few of them, they say, were from the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. What were their specific roles? So if you're a January 6th defendant's lawyer, you're kind of like, well, what did they do? What did they tell you in advance? What were their roles? What evidence did they present? Like, it's more worms, not less, wouldn't you think? Especially if you're someone who's fighting for your life. Now, according to their own sources, why didn't they warn about it? Well, they say here, it kind of wasn't really our job to do that, even though they presented evidence to Congress about what they did. They say, we really only have like 3 roles here. Either we investigate threats, we share relevant information with other law enforcement, or we provide tactical assets if someone else asks us. So it's a very much passing the buck, I would say. Let me know if you read it any other way. So what were the roles of these confidential human sources or informants? They're not really clear. Here's how they describe it, but I'm my question is, can they be deputized? What were they, the ones that they knew were coming? It says that they're important, right? It says that they're an important tool for collecting information or investigation or intelligence purposes, and they can play a crucial role in law enforcement, including the FBI's effort to combat crime and protect national security. So how much power do you think these confidential human sources have? This is something I'd like to ask an expert about, and I've invited FBI whistleblower Stephen Friend, who's been raising the red flag about how the FBI handled January 6 investigations. So he's going to come on next Monday and let us know, how powerful are these informants? What do we get from this? Now, they say that they were asked by Congress if they had passed on intel about January 6, and they originally said they did, but that was a lie. Here they are in this screen admitting as such, saying we did, in fact, identify documents that Congress had asked us about our assessment of January 6, and we gave them these documents. But as described above, the FBI did not direct their field offices for their their informants. So those things were not true. Not true, they said. They later say we presented some briefing documents for briefing Congress, and those were full of inaccuracies. What's another word, Clayton, for inaccuracies?
A lie?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Okay. Who did that? Who... you see what I'm saying here? Okay, so they're saying we told Congress that we had prepped for January 6th. Now we investigated ourselves. We actually didn't. We didn't do that much. We had people there, but we didn't warn anybody. We kind of sat on our hands. That was a lie before. This is not. That cooks up kind of funky, right? It doesn't smell good when you cook that in a pot. So I'm very... Again, I don't know how many times to say I'm upset about it, but I'm upset about it because we haven't been told the truth, and we can't tell if we are now. Now, we know that the FBI labeled these January 6 participants as terrorists. We learned that from the whistleblowing of Steve Friend. He was on the show last week, and he said that the FBI has been violating the civil rights of these people, and that's what he has been yelling about since he was forced out as an agent. Watch.
Specifically to the January 6 cases, the FBI departed from its practices for how it manages cases, and it was doing it to manipulate the crime statistics, the terrorist statistics, to create the false impression that terrorists are all around the country. And look, away from the politics of it, if there is a righteous prosecution that needs to happen, we need to be buttoned up. And the FBI, in my experience, was not following those protocols, was not handing that information over to the defense as they're supposed to do in following with due process. If I departed from rules for evidence tape, let's say, and I used the wrong color, I would have to document that and hand it over to the defense so that they could ask me, well, Agent Friend, you messed up on the color of the evidence tape. Did you potentially mess up somewhere else? That is all part of the process, and the FBI didn't do that. So I voiced that concern, and obviously the FBI disagreed with my sentiments on that. Look, I swore my oath. I was serious about it. I got training by going to the Holocaust Memorial and going to the MLK Memorial and learning that just following orders is never appropriate. So I brought those concerns forward. And on top of that, the final concern that I had was the safety issue. The FBI was sending SWAT teams to arrest individuals who had been interviewed, who had expressed to them that they would cooperate fully. And then because of the unique nature that they were approaching January 6th, they weren't recontacted for a year and a half. And then it was decided we're sending a SWAT team to arrest someone with no expectation that we were coming to his door. And to me, being a guy who did SWAT for 5 years, that was an unnecessary use of that tool.
Okay, so I think the government wants us to just read this and be like, okay, no FBI agents, informants, but they didn't do anything. So that's fine. This is a done deal. We're good with this. I don't think that that's enough. I think we should still continue to ask for answers such as, what role did those informants play? This is not specific enough. Defense lawyers will want to know who were these sources. Obviously you can't reveal your sources, but what role did they play? Did they have evidence that they handed over that was kept from the plaintiff or the defendants? Who directed the FBI to lie to Congress, if that's in fact true? Yeah. Or are we supposed to just say, oh, well, the FBI kind of sat on its hands and did a crap job?
Well, I want to
Maybe
know
they'll do better
these
next
informants,
time.
like, who directed them? What was the directive? How did they meet? Who, the emails, the text messages? What were you told to do on that day? Were you told to become a rabble rouser and incite us in a quote unquote insurrection?
Right.
Were you told to ramp people up and like, let's go to the Capitol, let's smash the building, let's smash the windows, let's go. Was that part of the plan? Mm-hmm. I'd love to see those text messages and emails now that we know that they've told us about 26 of these informants, these FBI informants, right? That's the only ones they've told us about. I mean, how many dozens more is it? Over 50? Over 75?
Yeah.
What's the real number of these informants? And what were they told? And by whom were they told it? Were they given directives? Were they given emails? Did they have a meeting in the few days beforehand directing them to take them there? What road would you take? All of that I want to know.
Yeah. And is there any evidence of entrapment that could help a January 6th defendant? That's also something I would want to know if I were their lawyers. If the FBI now, if you're a defendant and we have evidence that the FBI lied to Congress and had some kind of warning before, then how does that match up with their case against you? I want more answers. This is not the end by any means, this investigation. So don't let anybody tell you that it is. And again, I want help from more experts to look this over. So join us next week when we have Stephen Friend and others to let us know what they think of this.
I love this. I love this super chat from Divorced Homeless. It says, weak men. Oh, what did it say? Weak men create hard times. We are in hard times. Exactly. Perfect. And we're going to get to more news here in a second because that perfectly aligns with what I want to tell you about real quick here. Because right now we have a lot of weak men, and new data out shows testosterone levels at their lowest level since we've been recording testosterone levels in men. The core hormone that makes us who we are as men could be getting hit from all angles: processed food, environmental toxins, constant stress of modern life. But here's what recent clinical research has discovered: all those attacks could culminate in a rise in your stress hormone called cortisol. It could be blocking your natural testosterone from reaching its potential. Think about it. Your body wants to be strong, vital, and powerful, but it's being held back. That's why our friends at Sculpt Nation developed what's called Test Boost. They've created something that works with your body's natural processes using 8 powerful natural ingredients to help you reclaim what's rightfully yours. So you can try it right now. Take back your masculine edge right now. Go to sculptnation.com/redacted. Save up to 51% off your first order. That's sculptnation.com/redacted. Don't wait. This deal could expire soon. You got nothing to lose with their money back guarantee as well. Give it a try. sculptnation.com/redacted. Well, the mainstream media is at it once again, creating fake news and propaganda in order to get us involved in wars or to try to rename and rebrand Al-Qaeda in Syria, right? To show that they are the saviors of Syria. So do you guys know who Clarissa Ward is? Let me just describe Clarissa Ward from CNN, okay? Now this is how Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone describes her. Clarissa Ward, the news actress who once faked being under direct fire by Hamas and who has spent over a decade shamelessly propagandizing for the jihadists now executing minorities in Syria, just happened upon the last prisoner. The last prisoner who happened to be sleeping under a blanket in a prison, by the way, that was cleared out 3 days beforehand. Totally emptied 3 days beforehand. But CNN manages to sneak into this prison and manages to somehow, looking through, oh my God, is that somebody under a blanket over there? Is that a prisoner that we can then get on camera and come out and put on this whole propaganda piece for? Well, this piece that you're about to watch here is being called total propaganda. It's being debunked by a number of individuals who, by the way, were in prisons in Syria and describe this individual as a total liar. So we're going to play the news piece here and watch as he comes out after being in darkness for months at a time, not seeing daylight for months at a time, comes out into the sunlight and looks straight into the sun with perfectly manicured fingernails, by the way, because that's what prisoners have, perfectly manicured fingernails, shaved beard, and also a full face because he looks like he's had food. He's had a lot of food recently. So watch this and see if this CNN video passes the smell test. Watch.
I can't tell though, it might just be a blanket, but it's the only cell that's locked. Is he gonna shoot it?
The guard makes us turn the camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door.
But we didn't do
Going
that.
To get a closer look.
What was that thing? Is that just a
Still not
blanket laying
clear
there?
that there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there
Oh
someone
my God,
there?
it's moving. There's someone there. There's someone there.
Is someone there? Or is it just a blanket? I don't know.
We don't know.
Hello?
Maybe it's a rabid dog.
Oh my God, what is it? Let's check it out and see. Go ahead, CNN. Oh my God. It's okay. We're just journalists. We're with CNN.
Says, I'm a civilian. He tells the fighter he's from the city of Humps and has been in the cell for 3 months.
Okay, you're okay.
3 months.
You're okay. You're okay.
3 months. You're okay now.
Okay.
You're okay. You
Don't be afraid, it's a white woman.
Arm tightly with both hands.
Does anyone have any water? Water.
CNN saved this man's life.
Mike.
Okay, it's water. It's water.
Oh, it's water. Yeah, I haven't had water in 3 months. And I haven't seen daylight in 3 months. You're okay now. Clarissa, you are a hero for your amazing... All right. So then they go outside. They go outside and, the report continues on, and he looks up into the sun for the first time, and he hasn't seen daylight in 3 months. He's been in a dark cell, apparently, and he looks right up at the sun because your eyes would be fine in that situation.
Are CNN just unaware that the internet exists? That people are if they put that out, people are going to see it and scrutinize it. Like how are they unaware that people watch what they that looked awful.
Maybe they just assume that we don't.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, how propaganda... See, this is why the CIA is so nervous these days, right? When, the CIA works very closely with CNN and these intelligence and these media organizations so closely, and they feed them this information, like, you may want to go check on this prison because we hear it's been cleared out. Might be a good story there for you. You might want to go and check that out if you
Maybe
know what I
one
mean.
guy didn't get out and is waiting for you.
Maybe there might just be someone there that might want to be TV friendly. We've even cleaned him up. We've even shaved him. But they think people are stupid. And so many people are going to watch that report. They're going to be like, oh my God, thank God Al-Qaeda is now in charge of Syria. They rescued these poor people from the dictator Assad. They got him out of there. I'd like to know more about this guy, by the way. I'm sure we'll find out. By the way, this is the same Clarissa Ward, by the way, who you'll recall from this famous CNN report where she pretended to be under fire from Hamas, which was like laughingly debunked. And she jumped down on the ground to hide from incoming Hamas missile attacks. But it was actually Israel doing the bombing. But nevertheless, don't let that get in the way of your propaganda, CNN.
Clarissa is on the ground right now. Clarissa, tell us what's happening.
Stand by.
I'm almost dead.
Hi, John. So forgive me, I have a slightly unelegant position, but we have just had a massive barrage of rockets coming in here, not too far from us. So we have had to take shelter here by the roadside. We're just about 5 minutes away. Gaza is in that direction. We can hear now a lot of jets in the sky. We could also hear the Iron Dome intercepting a number of those rockets as they were.
Yeah, Clarissa, thanks. So that's your same CNN journalist there. I am curious who at CNN is like allowing these pieces to just get on the air. They're taking Clarissa Ward's like word, right? She's an amazing reporter. So whatever she says, or she films something, just put it on the TV. We don't need any
Which news
sort of
anchor said they were under fire and they weren't and got fired? Brian Williams.
Brian Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, from NBC News.
That literally cost him the anchor job.
Yeah, exactly.
So
relegated him to MSNBC at like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
That's how it ended his career at NBC News. But you can make up fake stuff on CNN all the time. No one's falling for your propaganda though this time.
I'm feeling a little fake because I'm wearing bed slippers under this. So
well, it is cold on your feet.
If that's what we're doing, we're admitting
that's a little
things.
different.
Okay,
that's a little different.
don't want to be outed for that. Okay. Well, the media is trying to make good now that the Biden years are ending, and I'm not feeling very forgiving. Are you? Also, here's my concern. I don't want them to overcorrect and then be effusive about the Trump administration and then we miss things. We don't want that. We wanted fairness all along. I can't even believe I'm seeing this because they have been lying for years now. About Russiagate, COVID, the vaccine, Hunter Biden. They were lying about the war we just showed you in Gaza, in Russia, in Syria. They refused to tell the truth about the Biden administration in order to help Kamala Harris get elected. And now when that didn't work, they're trying to turn it around amazingly. And I say, nope. I say no to this. I'm not having it. Look at this Time magazine cover of President-elect Trump as Person of the Year. And honestly, I can't believe I'm seeing this. In a video about this, a Time correspondent says that he was quite obviously the only choice.
In the history of the magazine, Time has nearly always named the person who wins the presidential election Person of the Year. But in this case, it was quite obviously the only choice. I am Eric Cortellessa. I'm a national political correspondent at Time magazine, and I've spent the last year covering Donald Trump's campaign for the White House. Donald Trump has singularly reshaped American politics and has transformed this country through his force of will, his ability to surmount obstacles that nobody thought he could, and for what he has revealed about the desires of the American electorate.
Okay, so that seemed a little begrudging to me, but at least it was on tone with exactly how Donald Trump has been able to gain influence in the United States politics. They acknowledge his influence, the success of his campaign, and they allow him to look not unattractive. So you're used to him looking kind of dehydrated and orange and maybe chubby and grumpy. They do these unflattering close-ups from his, under his chin. And now look how they allowed him to pose for this. And liberals are understandably upset to see him this way when they've been conditioned to see him as so terrifying and grotesque. Look at this liberal that I like to follow because she is always upset about things. She says, "Are you effing kidding me with this? And it doesn't even look like him. What the F, Time?" Well, yeah, because she's not used to him getting accolades. She's confused that he looks like a person and not the person that she's been conditioned to hate. Like in this 2016 cover, just before he was elected, this is how they've been telling us to perceive of him. Now, in the article, the Person of the Year article, Time flat out reports that Trump had in 2016. This article is full of inaccuracies, but they didn't care. Now, in the article today, they describe him as bonhomie, as in genial and friendly. Can you imagine? Look at that word. I was like, really? They're calling him this? And it's still not an accurate article, though. They say that he left office in 2020 in disgrace for trying to overturn the election, which lacks the nuance of what actually happened. Says that he wanted a federal abortion ban, but his campaign talked him out of it, but they don't source that. But for all of that, it is noticeably less fear-mongering about Trump. A lot of doubt about whether he can fulfill his big campaign promises. We all feel that, right? Afraid that we may not get what he has promised. But, they could have done this all along and chose not to. And so all of a sudden they're waking up to the reasons that people may have voted him in. And it feels so disingenuous to me. This is another thing that also set me off today. This New York Times headline, waking up to the fact recent immigration surge has been largest in history. Under President Biden, more than 2 million immigrants have entered illegally. It doesn't say that. That's me saying that, illegally. But what it does say is that the rate of immigration has been a faster pace of arrivals than any other period on record, including the peak years of Ellis Island, when millions of Europeans came to the United States. Even after taking into account today's larger U.S. population, the recent surge is the most rapid since at least 1850. Way to catch up. They could have been covering this all along, but they didn't for fear of hurting the Kamala Harris campaign. What demons? And in fact, a reader on this article, sorry, go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I was just gonna say because if I hadn't just read that headline, I wouldn't have even known that was happening. It's not like I've heard it anywhere else for the past 3 years.
Yeah, thanks, New York Times, for being on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, right? But the problem is there's an actual comment from a reader on this New York Times post that says, this is frustrating because I feel that I'm an informed citizen, but I never had a clear idea of what the immigration situation was. This is a sincere New York Times reader saying this is brand new information because the New York Times has kept it from them. The New York Post calls this a betrayal of their readers. I call it willful dishonesty. So we are observing this now. All of a sudden, the media says we can report these things because it won't hurt the Democrats anymore. For now, until 4 years later. Social media also making a mea culpa. There are reports, and in fact, Meta admitted that Mark Zuckerberg has donated $1 million to the Trump inauguration fund in order to brown nose, or what they say is actually improve his historically tense relationship with the incoming administration. He censored the Hunter Biden laptop story to hurt Trump and help President Biden. So no, sir, I don't think you get a good seat at the inauguration, even if you paid $1 million for it. I feel like they need to stand down and apologize for keeping truths from us. I don't want them to overcorrect. I want an apology. You let me know what you want from them. But I'm mad about it.
Well, also, he was at the New York Stock Exchange today. So he was there ringing the bell for the first time from any sitting president since Ronald Reagan to go to the New York Stock Exchange. And you see the markets responding, of course. See like stocks like Tesla, like surging right now. The move away from the Federal Reserve could mean moving towards gold and silver. In fact, I co-authored a report on this, going through all of the details about all of these different commodities on the rise under Trump. You saw him last week basically say, we're going to let you drill, baby, drill. No regulation. Pull off the shackles of being able to allow companies to drill in these. In fact, we have some Oregon loggers who were just watching our show today saying, Oregon loggers love Redacted. But this is exactly what's about to happen. Gold, silver, back to basics. So I did this whole report. You can download it for free. If you want to understand how this is going to affect gold and silver and other commodities, it's a really good report. So again, I co-authored this. It's free. Go grab it. redacted.inc/Trump. All right, let's do some UFO updates now, because a major update on the UFOs over America over the past 24 hours. And we had this report from the New Jersey State Police now admitting that they have revealed that unidentified drones are operating on a frequency that cannot be detected. Okay, we can't detect the frequency? We don't know, admits the New Jersey State Police. We don't know what these things are. New Jersey Representative Jeff Van Drew now is doubling down on the same claim that he made yesterday, which we brought to you yesterday here on the show, that these mysterious drones are coming from an Iranian mothership off the east coast of the United States. And he slammed Pentagon officials for it at the time for treating the American people like they're stupid and withholding information about these drones. This is what he said this morning. Watch.
These drones very well could be launched from a ship. It could be hundreds of miles out at sea. These types of drones go much greater distances. These, again, are something that we normally don't see in the United States. So there is a real possibility. Could it be China? Absolutely. Could it be somebody else? It sure could. Here's the deal. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it's about. They haven't taken one down to analyze it. They have no idea where it comes from, but they know that it's not that. I mean, that's nonsense. They do not know what they're doing. Why don't they take one of them down, analyze it, and let us know what's really happening? I hope they know more than they're telling us, but that's disrespectful to the public and to Congress. It's about time they leveled with the truth. Hopefully they'll give us some information this afternoon. But even if they do, it's like a month too late. This reminds me of the spy balloon. Last year, traveled the whole country.
Yeah,
wait. Yesterday he said if it was our own government, they'd have told us.
Yeah.
He literally said that yesterday.
He's all over the place with this, but he is doubling down on the fact that these are coming from an Iranian mothership. So he's doubling down on that, but now he wants answers from the government, and he hopes that they'll tell us the truth about it today, I guess. So we'll suddenly get answers on this. But he's right about one thing on this, which is that it's been about a month now. I mean, November 18th is when these things were first spotted. And they're showing up in massive numbers, staying up in the air for 6-7 hours at a time, even longer in some reports. And where are they going back to? We don't know. We don't have any idea. Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling BS on all of this. She says this idea that the Pentagon or the Defense Department doesn't know where these are coming from is total garbage. She says they absolutely know. She's calling BS. Watch.
Well, number one, I'm going to call it total bullshit that no one knows what these are. And I think it's a slap in the face to the American people to say they don't know what this is. They can track down a guy that just killed a CEO, but they can't identify what nightly drones are and where they're coming from. I think that is absolutely disgusting to lie to the American people like this, and the truth needs to be told about it. Secondly, if they're telling the truth, then this country is in horrible shape. We're all in danger. I mean, seriously, if our great government can't identify what these drones are, they're flying every single night, that people are sitting out there videoing with their cell phones, then no American is safe. And I have no respect if our government cannot say what these are.
So if we don't know who they are.
Yes,
right?
hallelujah to her. So the Belleville mayor of New Jersey also just spoke out this afternoon saying that they were just briefed. 500 different mayors were briefed on this, and all sorts of unanswered questions that he says here in this interview. Watch.
New Jersey has some of the best detection equipment in the nation, I am told. We have by far the most robust equipment, is what the state police told us. The detection equipment is up, but not detecting. These are 6-foot drones that are somehow evading our detection. They are not being detected. Here's some unknowns.
Oh, sorry. You can keep playing it. Sorry.
And again, they were very transparent today. So some of the unknowns. The state police says, unknowns. We have no idea where they're taking off from. No idea. We have no idea where they're landing. No idea at all. We have no idea who is behind them because, as I mentioned, they are not state, and we are told it is not federal. We have no idea the drone types, as I mentioned before, that they stay up about 6 to 7 hours. And if you're a drone operator, you probably know that that's a very, very long time. We know
so
that
that's all we don't know where they're from. We don't know where they're landing. We don't know any of that, right? As Brad Cage writes, a good rule of thumb is if the deep state can't find out who did it, then the deep state are the ones who did it. I love that, Brad. Friend of the show, Ashton Forbes, who's going to be on the show soon here again. We've had an interview with Ashton before, but he's going to be back soon here during the holiday season. But he said it's too bad we don't have some kind of global persistent infrared surveillance system constantly scanning the entire planet. Otherwise, we'd be able to figure out what these drones are and where they're coming from. Oh, wait, we do. SBIR is the space-based infrared system that we have at our disposal. That's exactly what we have already in place to completely scan the United States and the world, for instance, constantly scanning the entire planet. We know exactly where they're coming from. I mean, we can pinpoint and tell you what the movement of trucks in Russia, for crying out loud. We know what underground bunkers are hiding in Iran, for crying out loud. We know exactly where these things are coming from, but we're just not being honest, of course. And then overnight, we got new images, by the way. Look at this helicopter coming in contact with one of these things in the sky. Look at the size of this thing. So in the back, look in the bottom picture here. You can see the helicopter in the background, and there's like massive craft, unlike anything I've ever seen before. Okay. Is this some sort of a man-made craft? Looks like it probably is. The Black Book Project craft that we don't know anything about. That's probably exactly what it is. And then in Florida, now not just New Jersey, Florida, in Plantation, Florida, this woman was live streaming last night on Facebook, and she was showing live these orbs in the sky. And then she shows them, they transform into airplanes and then take off. And she's like, for 5 hours and for 5 days in a row, I've been capturing these things. So watch this as these things transform from an orb and then suddenly just shoot off as airplanes. Watch.
Okay, guys, this is real time live streaming. Drones, UAP, UFO, call them whatever you want. This is not normal. And by the way, the FAA clears. There's no airplanes flying right now. in the greater plantation area. Look how it takes flight. That one takes flight in the shape of an airplane. That one takes flight and eventually, well, it's still looking like an orb. Okay, so let's see how big this one gets. I believe this has some kind of technology that it projects some kind of holographic image of an airplane. I know I sound crazy, but I've seen these now for 5 days. 5 days.
So there you go.
Did anybody else think that the emoji hearts were the drones at first?
Yeah.
People pushing them. And I was like, and they're heart-shaped?
People kept pounding the hearts on that.
Okay, I'm not the only gullible one.
We got more news to get to here on your Thursday. A lot more news. In fact, we're going to speak to Dan Cohen next about what's going on with this rebranding of Al-Qaeda in Syria and something that Benjamin Netanyahu just said, which is one of the most hilarious things I've heard in quite a while. We'll talk about that. By the way, President Trump was asked today whether or not he trusts Benjamin Netanyahu. And Trump said, I don't trust anybody. So that's how that's going to go. Good answer. Good answer. We'll see how that goes coming up in the future. But first, right now we got a lot of Trump's cabinet picks are in place. We're excited about that. We're hoping, of course, that Tulsi Gabbard gets pushed through for Director of National Intelligence. We know over the past 24 hours, Ambassador Bolton has come out and said that that is why the intelligence community and the deep state is scared. They are scared of Tulsi Gabbard. We're excited about Doge and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy slashing $2 trillion potentially from the national spend. All of that is very exciting. However, there's still all sorts of things we need to worry about. Biden pushing us into World War III. The U.S. debt is still massively growing as we speak. They just approved this massive defense budget last night, the largest ever. The cost of groceries, basic necessities, still going through the roof. And that's why we are so proactive in our family about investing in things that we can protect our family with. That is, we protect our family by owning precious metals, and we own real estate. And that's a very important part of our portfolio. And our friends at Lear Capital can help you do that. You can actually call them right now and speak to them on the phone. They're an American company, American patriots. They're not located in China or India or anywhere else. You'll call them. They're Americans. They'll pick up the phone and just tell them we sent you and just have a conversation with them and get their free gold report right now. And it'll walk you through exactly the benefits of owning precious metals. You can own them in your own home, like in your own gun safe if you want to, or you can have them held in a 24-hour secure facility off-site, totally up to you. But just call them, 1-800-613-3557. And again, that's why they have over 27 years experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, $3 billion in trusted transactions. It's the only company with a 24-hour risk-free purchase guarantee. You don't pay unless you're 100% satisfied. So call them right now, 1-800-613-3557 for your free guide, or go to LearRedacted.com and ask them how you can get $15,000 in bonus gold or silver with a qualified purchase. Again, LearRedacted.com. Overnight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released one of the funniest videos that I've seen in a long time. It's like a Saturday Night Live bit, claiming that Israel has no desire or intentions to interfere in Syria's internal affairs. Watch this comedy. And as Caitlin Johnstone wrote this morning, quote, only Israel could invade and occupy large stretches of a country, bomb it 480 times in 48 hours, destroy 80% of its military defenses, and then claim it has no intention of interfering in that country's internal affairs. She nails it. Meanwhile, the rebranding of the CIA-backed brutal terrorists now controlling Syria is happening in real time. But our next guest says this rebranding didn't start just this week. After the occupation by the Biden administration, it's been happening for years. Dan Cohen from Uncaptured Media is all over this story and joins me now. Dan, good to see you. So how far back does this go?
Well, I began covering the Syria conflict, the dirty war on Syria, in 2016. And at that point, it became very clear to me that the U.S. was not very secretly funding, arming, training, and not only the U.S., its allies in the UK, Qatar, Turkey, the UAE, Saudi Arabia were funding and arming and training a variety of terrorist groups, what the U.S. government has acknowledged as terrorist groups, and many of them are officially listed as terrorist groups, in order to destroy Syria's sovereignty. It was never about Assad himself or the Syrian prisons or anything like that. It was about destroying Syria. And that's what they've just achieved. Now, in order to do that, of course, they had to wage an incredible propaganda campaign to convince Americans that Al-Qaeda was actually the good guys. I mean, I'm old enough, and I assume most of our viewers are, and I know you were around, Clayton, when 9/11 happened, and the government said Al-Qaeda did it, and we have to launch wars on Afghanistan and then Iraq and have permanent war on terror, some amorphous concept, all over the globe. And that's never actually stopped. But in the middle of that, there was a rebranding effort to make Al-Qaeda into the heroes against the evil dictator Assad. And when I first really became aware of it or when I started documenting it, was 2017. And that was when the Syrian government, with the help of Hezbollah and Russia, beat back these terrorist militias from the cities they occupied. And I was here in Washington, D.C. on a short visit, and there happened to be a screening in Congress of a film called Cries from Syria by a Russian-American director whose previous film was called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay. His name's Yevgeny Afanevsky. And then he somehow got to become a geopolitical expert of sorts on Syria and on Ukraine, the two, big U.S. dirty wars. And so I went to this film screening. There were a number of very neoconservative members of Congress there, like Adam Kinzinger, the kind of young man's John McCain. There was S.E. Cupp, the CNN, at that time, a CNN host. There was, a number of these figures. And one of them was a guy named Charles Lister, who is a so-called expert at the Middle East Institute, which is a think tank here in D.C., funded by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all of the same regimes that are funding these terrorist groups to destroy Syria. So I want to show this clip of what I actually caught Charles Lister. I recorded him saying in Washington, D.C. Before his audience in the U.S. Capitol, Lister portrayed Al-Qaeda as a popular movement with broad support in Syria.
Al-Qaeda has really got it right, I hate to say.
He then went on to claim Al-Qaeda is more moderate than ISIS, despite the fact that the two groups share the same genocidal ideology.
Although they've become more aggressive and more hardline over time, they are still very distinctly different to ISIS. Their strategy is so much more effective on the ground. They are winning hearts and minds.
So they really got it right. I mean, they're not like ISIS. These are good guys.
Yeah, they're like nice ISIS. They're Pal Qaeda is what I like to call them.
Al-Qaeda.
It was amazing because if you were paying attention to what was happening in Idlib province in northwestern Syria, where Al-Qaeda, then it was called Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, then, they went through a series of rebrands from Jabhat al-Nusra, which was the original Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. Then it became Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. Then it became HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the one that they're using today. And they formally broke links with Al-Qaeda, but the ideology is completely the same. It's like when Blackwater, rebranded after its scandals and became Academy, and is, it's just again and again it happens. So they just expect we're going to swallow that down. But it was just amazing for me to see this open glorification of Al-Qaeda as some popular group, when, if you're paying attention to what was going on in Idlib, there were summary executions of women simply accused of adultery in the street. They're indoctrinating generations of children to be terrorists. And I hate to say that, but that's the sad truth. And here in Washington, they're saying, oh, this is actually very moderate. And then fast forward to 2019, when the U.S. took out al-Baghdadi. The Trump administration took out al-Baghdadi in Idlib province. Well, al-Baghdadi at that point was basically toothless. He was not really running anything in Idlib province. Al-Jolani, the guy who's now running Syria, was running Idlib at that point. And it's very curious to me why the U.S. took out Baghdadi, but all this time did not want to take out Al-Jolani, because I think he is basically a NATO asset. I mean, everything he did, and he's backed by Turkey. Everything came through Turkey. The whole dirty war on Syria was basically run through southern Turkey. And so that's why he was allowed to live and continue to organize, why he was had a basically normal, advanced NATO military capabilities, so they could so easily overrun the Syrian military. So, I mean, this really goes back to the mid-2000s is when I kind of first began documenting it. And remember that Netflix is staffed by a bunch of former Obama administration officials. When the Obama administration ended, they all went into Netflix so they could basically do deep state propaganda.
It's remarkable. You know, we had Congressman Thomas Massie on the show yesterday who confirmed what you're saying here. He said he was debunking this in real time, and these people are on the current U.S. terrorist watch list. Like, this isn't some sort of fabrication, right? They've been on the terrorist watch list in the United States. So it's amazing to me. And so, wow. I mean, this is a big revelation that Jolani, this terrorist, is likely a NATO asset, basically a CIA asset, who's now, the reason they didn't kill him is because they were controlling him and allowing this to happen ahead of President Trump taking office on January 20th. There was a rush to kind of push this through. That's Congressman Massey's position on this, that there was a speed up process to make this happen sooner rather than later, so that President Trump couldn't do anything about it, essentially. And then we see all of these reports over the past 24 hours of huge pallets of money showing up as well, to fund, basically handing them tens of millions of dollars in funding, weapons. So basically funding and arming HTS, these terrorists in Syria.
Exactly. Yes, the congressman is absolutely right. This is clearly done before President Trump could take office with his anti-war sensibilities. I mean, I did not vote for President Trump. I'm not really a fan of him, but the fact is he has contradictory positions in which he has instincts that are anti-interventionist. As he said in his tweet, "This is not our fight. Let's stay out of it." Now, of course, President Trump also ordered the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general who was the lead anti-ISIS fighter, and he won't admit that, that was a huge boon to ISIS, and there were huge celebrations in Idlib province when he did that. But nonetheless, he is correct that, the U.S. should not get involved with this anymore. There's nothing good that will come from it. Yeah, I mean, this is just the reality of it.
It is, and it's really disturbing. What was your response to seeing Jolani on CNN? Like, this rebranding, they're elevating this guy and doing these, like, CNN and the Democratic media are just lifting these guys up. And you've seen the reports from CNN, as we featured here earlier in the show. These weird CNN reports from Syria showing just how oppressive everything has been, and now the terrorists that these rebels that have taken over, it's going to be sunny skies now in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible to watch that Clarissa Ward piece where she obviously staged the quote-unquote liberation of a prisoner from the Sadnaya prison, in which he's apparently been there for 3 days after everyone else was emptied out of the prison, and he claims to have not seen the sun for months and months, and he walks outside and he's well groomed, his beard is groomed, he's not starved, his fingernails are even clean, and he walks out and the first thing he does is look directly up at the sun. It's so clearly staged, and this is the same Clarissa Ward that faked being under attack by Hamas in Israel, totally staged a scene, and Clarissa Ward's she was so upset about the lack of intervention to overthrow Assad years ago that she said, "I'm no longer a journalist, I'm an activist." And she wrote some angry, deranged email to Ben Rhodes, who was a national security advisor, and
Under Obama.
said, yeah, exactly, under Obama, and and was just angry that the Syrian government had been hadn't been overthrown. And this is, you can't spell Clarissa without CIA. That's what I would say about Clarissa Ward. I mean, she's just one of them. Arwa Damon, who sniffed a supposedly sarin-laced backpack she found on the ground. That's how she determined it was sarin. Of course, CNN spread the 40 beheaded babies hoax to basically stimulate support for the genocide of Gaza. This is CNN. This is not journalism. This is not fact finding. This isn't about the Syrian people. This is about propaganda.
Yeah. No, it's a great summation of it. This rebranding of Al-Qaeda as Pal-Qaeda. CNN is working lockstep with them in the deep. We see this in the media. We know that CNN, we know the New York Times, the Washington Post are just extensions of these deep state operatives in the intelligence community. And then the Americans, if they get 10 minutes of news a day and, they're after work, they have a busy day and they flip on CNN for a few minutes, they'll see this. They'll say, oh, wow, that's amazing. This guy was just liberated from a prison, and wow, these people have done great work. And then they go about their day taking care of their families. And this is how the propaganda spreads. So it's our job to make sure that it doesn't. And Dan has done an amazing job of this. Follow Dan over at his great website and YouTube channel, Uncaptured Media. And follow him on X as well. Dan, what's your X handle?
My X is at Dan Cohen 3000. My website is uncaptured.media. And if I can make one more point, Clayton, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want Americans to think about the fact that Al-Qaeda is now being rebranded by the minute as some kind of beneficial force. Yet after 9/11, our civil liberties were taken away. We had the Patriot Act. We had the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. We had everything we go through at TSA to this day. All this phony kind of theater about security, where if your toothpaste tube is slightly too big, they take it away because that could be somehow dangerous. When I go to the airport and I watch a mom who's traveling with 3 kids alone, and the container she has for her pumped breast milk has to be dumped out. All of that stuff is a result of what the national security state did as a pretext to fighting terrorism after 9/11. And now Al-Qaeda is being rebranded as good, but our civil liberties, all that wiretapping, listening in on our conversations, that's not going away. That's here to stay. So are they going to give us that our freedoms, our liberties back now that Al-Qaeda is good again? Of course not. But, I think we just have to be able to think bigger and not be goldfish bouncing back and forth in the little goldfish bowl, and just turn around and keep going. There's a much bigger agenda to not only destroy Syria and destroy Gaza, but to destroy America, to take away our freedoms, exactly what they said that they were trying to stop, to destroy the social fabric of our society and implement pre-existing agendas.
No, that's one of the smartest points I've heard on this show in quite a while. And I really appreciate it. And think about it. Will they give us our civil liberties back now that Al-Qaeda is our friend? And they took them away. We have to take off our shoes at the airport because of Al-Qaeda terrorists trying to blow up aircraft and too much liquid in a toothpaste tube. You're exactly right about that. Well said. That's something for all of us to think about as you watch this propaganda unfolding. And I would like journalists to ask that question to the Biden administration. If you get to sit down, Kristen Welker over at NBC, you sat down with Trump. Will you sit down with Biden administration officials and press them about this rebranding of Al-Qaeda? Now they're our friend at this holiday season. How many Americans would invite Al-Qaeda over for their Christmas dinner? I wonder how many people would open up the doors for that. Dan, great to see you as always, and really great points. Really, 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 really great points. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm still kind of reeling about it. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, excellent point. But it's not just breast milk and, toothpaste at the airport. It's also they spy on us to make sure that there's no Al-Qaeda activity in our text messages. So you're going to stop that now? That's, fantastic point. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Now that Al-Qaeda is coming over to play football in the backyard for, your Christmas afternoon, come on.
Maybe now what they'll be doing is they'll be scanning your text messages and making sure you're pro Al-Qaeda.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
Your friends. Do you have Al-Qaeda in your contacts list? Are they?
You don't? You're an extremist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. By the way, people asking, in fact, so this is so funny. So Phil Torney, he wrote a book called What I Saw That Day, Israel's June 8th, 1967 Holocaust of U.S. servicemen aboard the USS Liberty. Now, I've been talking to Phil for many, many months about coming on Redacted to do the show. He was set to actually come on before Election Day, and I think there was some sort of transportation or some sort of, it was a health issue or transportation issue or something, so we couldn't have Phil on the show to talk about the bombing of the USS Liberty by Israel and American service members being put out to just slaughtered with the help of the CIA. The CIA in Israel did this in 1967. And Phil reached out to me after he saw my hat. I was wearing a USS Liberty hat on the show one day. Anyway, Phil is going to be on the show. It's just been a matter of coordinating schedules here. So Phil is going to be in studio here during the holiday season. So we're excited to be able to talk to Phil about his what he saw that day, the bombing of the USS Liberty, and how the deep state, the CIA, worked with Israel to slaughter American servicemen. Like, you should read that book if you want to understand what really happened with these regimes. It's so disgusting.
Another programming note, if that's what we're doing, is that we've had many users on X ask us to interview Maxime Bernier from the People's Party of Canada. And I was not aware of his candidacy, and we are glad to. And we've extended the invitation. In fact, his team has reached out to us, and we are going to talk to him as one of what would seem one of the more popular candidates going up against the Trudeau regime. Then we are excited about that. So that is something that we are trying to get on the books, hopefully before the holiday. We're working on that. So thank you for that suggestion. We love that. We see you when you suggest things like this on X. We're working on it. So yeah, absolutely. We're going to do that. We're going to talk about Canada in a second. We're going to talk to one of my favorite data scientists, Regina Wattil, coming up, because, a lot of times we still see this propaganda. We wrote in the newsletter today about how the Biden administration has extended the PrEP Act to extend emergency powers for vaccine makers and other, what do they call it, therapeutic providers around the COVID emergency. There is no COVID emergency. The CDC shows less than a 4% rate of contraction of COVID right now. Why are they doing this? And when someone comes at you and says, well, the vaccine saved lives, what do you say to that if you're someone who studies the data? We're going to ask her about that coming up in a second. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at the Wellness Company, because big changes on the horizon, obviously, in the American healthcare system. Trump back in office, RFK Jr. taking over healthcare industries in the United States. Get ready for a shakeup, and RFK Jr., not FDR Jr. RFK Jr. even posted that the FDA's war on public health is about to end. And also their suppression on therapeutic drugs that we know have been shown to work on certain viruses, such as ivermectin and other essential vitamins. Well, the Wellness Company is ahead of that game. They're on that with their emergency kit, which is stocked with these limited access medications. So these kits cut through the red tape, especially during the holidays when getting sick during travel is, of course, the norm. So be prepared with over 30 illnesses without having to get an emergency prescription or going to urgent care. You can have it in your home if you have this kit. They have drugs like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, a Z-Pak, amoxicillin, things that you may need, that you need it, right? And you don't want to go through the red tape. Well, you can have it in your house with a guidebook as to how to safely use it. They can treat common things like UTIs, strep throat, bacterial infections. So right now you can use the promo code Redacted. Go to twc.health/redacted and you'll save $30 at checkout, plus get free shipping. So one more time, that's twc.health/redacted and use the code Redacted and get $30 at checkout. Well, when the media says the vaccine saves lives, what do they mean by that? Normally, when we see these studies, what we see is that they're based on math models that give estimates of really high deaths. And since we never reached those numbers, they say, voila, that's it. The vaccine did this. Well, that's not exactly proof to me, but I'm not a mathematician. So I went to my favorite data scientist, Regina Wattil, on this. She's the author of the book Fisman's Fraud, which has become a bestseller in the last year. And in this book, she showed how the study that the Canadian government used to punish the unvaccinated was based on totally bogus math. And she's been going to politicians and academic journals ever since, all year. She called that hate science. So we asked her, I spoke with her yesterday and asked her about these math models that attribute the COVID vaccine to saving lives. Watch what she had to say. If our viewers, let's say, are at a holiday party and someone says to them, well, you know, the vaccine saved lives, can you tell us in a quick, cocktail napkin response, how would you respond to that? And then what maybe is the data that we can use to back up how we might feel about this?
Okay, well, Natalie, the scientific reality is that one cannot say that the vaccines saved more lives than they cost. The clinical trials never showed that at all. Instead, they actually showed that the mRNA vaccines carried an increased risk of serious adverse events of special interest, including death. And that increased risk outweighed any reduction in COVID-19 hospitalizations. So that was bad news for the pharmaceutical companies. So what they did was they cut their clinical trials short. And they basically unblinded the clinical trials. They offered the placebo group the vaccines, and that basically sabotaged any future comparisons between the two groups. And then when these vaccines were put on the market, there was no attempt at all to actively track the adverse events in the general population. So it became almost impossible to assess the true risk these vaccines posed to the population. So without having established a reduction in death in the clinical trials, what some researchers did was they attempted to say that they attempted to claim this benefit by playing with real-world data. Mm-hmm. But the problem was that real-world data was showing some very disturbing trends. So as these vaccines rolled out, we actually saw a rise in COVID cases, a rise in COVID deaths, and a rise in excess all-cause mortality. So we saw these trends in various regions throughout the world, and that's a huge problem to anyone trying to push these vaccines. Because if you're going to say the vaccines saved lives, you have to show an actual reduction in deaths. But instead, we see an increase. So some researchers, what they did was abandoned proper scientific methodology and then just resort to pure fantasy. So it goes to what you were saying, Natalie, they assume that the vaccines are highly effective and they just claim things would have been worse without them.
For instance, we communicated about a chart last week presented by Our World in Data. And what we saw was that they gave us this hypothetical spike in deaths that may have happened in and around the fall of 2021. And because we never saw that, well, they attribute that to a success of the vaccine. But they don't tell us why we might have seen this spike in deaths when deaths were fairly constant throughout the second year of the pandemic. It's very confusing why they would do this. And so where do you think they got these estimated death models that never were?
Well, it goes something like this, Natalie. They say that basically if we assume that the vaccines were highly effective and we saw this many deaths, then just imagine how many more we would have seen if we didn't have the vaccines. And then they construct models to simulate that imagined scenario where they assume the vaccines are highly effective and they pretend the virus was a lot more deadly than it actually was. So that's what they did in that Lancet study. The Our World data uses the Lancet study, and that study claimed 15 to 20 million lives were saved in the first year. But again, it's completely hypothetical under the assumption that the vaccines were effective. I know that here in Canada, we did a similar study that came out in 2022. So both those studies came out in 2022. And if you remember what was happening then, we had the Omicron wave. So everybody could see that these vaccines did not work. So these studies basically served to gaslight the population and to say, no, they did work. We're just going to make it up.
Well, what they meant when they said they don't work is they're not preventing transmission, when early media reports lied to us and said that they do, even though they never tested for that. They only tested for symptoms. And so they continue to put forward these estimates as if the vaccine was responsible for what most likely the real world data shows natural immunity was responsible for. Is that your assessment?
Not quite. What they did was they just made it up completely, because we didn't actually see a reduction. Yeah, we didn't actually even see a reduction in deaths at all. So they just said, oh, it would have been worse, right? So it's completely made up.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And then another thing that we see a lot is that they say, well, it's reduced the risk of ventilators. And so they extrapolate that as a success. What's your assessment of the risk of being put on a ventilator?
Okay, well, I'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to just mention another study that came out last month by John Ioannidis, because that study has been getting a lot of play, at least on Twitter. What he and his colleagues did was, with their study, they do a kind of reality check, but they still ignore the huge elephant in the room. So instead of creating a model simulation, what his group did is they just do a rough calculation of the number of lives they think the vaccines saved. So what they do is they estimate the number of deaths that would have occurred without the vaccines, and they just multiply it by the vaccine effectiveness. And to get the number of people who would have died without the vaccines, well, what they do is they assume that without the vaccines, almost everyone would have caught COVID by the time Omicron came around. And then they use fatality estimates based on COVID deaths that occurred before the vaccines were rolled out. But if you recall, Natali, COVID deaths are people who died with COVID, not because of COVID, right?
Right.
And so a lot of people think that fatality is an exaggeration, because if you recall, the CDC actually came out early in the pandemic and stated that 94% of COVID-related deaths had one or more comorbid conditions, with an average of 4 additional causes of death. So that fatality estimate is already high. And so they take that number of people that they thought would have died without vaccines, and they times it by vaccine effectiveness, but they just assume that the vaccines are effective at preventing death. It's not proven, it's not established, it's just an assumption. And when they do that, they get 2.5 million COVID deaths averted since the introduction of these vaccines. And 1 million of those being in the first year, mostly the elderly. But why I bring this up is that estimate is already over an order of magnitude less than that Lancet study, right?
Yeah,
because Johnny
that's 2.5 million versus 20 million. So people are just very comfortable with that spread. Like, oh, yes, that must be it. Fine.
But it's actually worse, because he's saying 2.5 up to now, and only 1 million in the first year. And the Lancet said 20 million in the first year. But it gets worse than that, because Ioannidis and his colleagues even admit that they completely ignored any deaths due to the vaccine or any injuries due to the vaccine, right? And they also didn't try to explain the increase in access mortality, right? So when you don't consider those things, the Ioannidis 2.5 million lives saved, that's pretty meaningless, and it's actually misleading, because even if you assume 2.5 million COVID deaths were averted, that's of little consolation if the vaccines themselves cause 17 million access deaths, which is what Canadian researcher Denny Rancourt is claiming, right?
So yeah, that's not a good trade-off. That's negative.
It's not.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at, and this gets into what you were asking with the ventilators to some degree, because what Denny Rancourt does is he looks at the excess deaths that occurred between 2020 and 2022, and he estimates about 31 million excess all-cause mortality deaths, right? And he tries to figure out what possibly could have caused these extra deaths. So what he does is he looks at the pattern of the deaths and the timing of the deaths in the various countries around the world, and he draws 3 conclusions. He says that those trends are not consistent with the spread of a viral pathogen. So he says that the actual COVID virus doesn't really explain that increase in excess all-cause mortality. But he says that those trends are consistent with the timing and introduction of various public policies. So he talks about things like the lockdowns. He talks about improper treatment, like being put on the mechanical ventilators or not being given antibiotics when you have a bacterial infection. And he also looks at how the excess deaths increased as the vaccines were rolled out in certain subpopulations. So he says that all those public policy measures, they are consistent with the deaths. And so he attributes the 31 million excess deaths to public policy. And 17 million of those, he says, is due to he thinks is due to the vaccine alone.
So just this week, Joe Biden extended the emergency measures for the COVID vaccine. And so that the pharmaceutical companies continue to have liability and it continued to be on the market with emergency use authorization. And so do you think that there is big pharma funding behind these studies in order to be able to do that? Is there any rational reason to do it? Who's behind these studies, do you think, and these moves?
Well, these studies claiming that lives are saved, they're not scientific at all. They're pure fantasy. They're based completely on assumptions. And as I mentioned, because things were not established in the clinical trials, they looked at real-world data. They tried to play with that. And when real-world data didn't look good, they simply made things up. So that's where things are headed. So who is funding that? I mean, you would think that it has to do with big pharma because they're the ones who are benefiting from this. But a lot of governments will go along with it because there was a lot of opportunity that this presented for them as well.
Yeah. And so
a lot of these studies, a lot of these studies, you know, like here in Canada, a lot of these bogus studies are funded by our own federal government. They continue to fund fraudulent studies.
With very little fallout. I mean, that's one of the main plots of your book is who was behind it. You went to the universities and the academic journals that published this hate science, and you were met with pushback when you were clearly showing them these are bogus mathematical models that are being used to hurt people. And so where are you in asking for accountability from that?
Well, there's been a lot of activity here, Natalie, because the federal agency continued to fund FISMAN, who was our front man for pandemic modeling. After I showed that his study that was used to prop up the travel restrictions and the mandates was completely bogus, they continued to fund him. And then they were asked about the funding of these studies and whether they received any negative feedback after the publication. And they actually had the nerve to say they didn't, despite the fact that I wrote a book on it and our correspondence is published. So they actually said, no negative feedback, and they continued to fund FISMAN. So I've gone back to them. And again, they're still backing him. My book was mentioned again in Parliament last week. So that's promising. But they show it doesn't look like they're slowing down with this at all.
Gosh. Okay. Well, you're doing the work. You can follow Regina's amazing adventures on X at Regina Wattiel. And again, I want to tell you to look out for the book. It's called FISMAN's Fraud. And it reads a little bit like The Fugitive. the movie, the Harrison Ford film. And it's real. This is our lives now. So thank you for your time coming on Redacted. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much again for having me back. Thanks, Natalie.
That's going to do it for us today at Redacted. Thank you so much for joining us. That's the last of our live show for the week, but we will have content for you throughout the weekend. So stay subscribed to the channel, if you will, and we will be live next week as well, Monday through Thursday, leading up to the holiday. It's a busy time, so stick with us. Also, we have a newsletter. You can find it at redacted.inc, and it's totally free. There's nothing behind a paywall unless we link to something where another media outlet has a paywall, but we don't charge you for it. We want it to be something that is for you, in order to be able to study the content that's here on Redacted. So please subscribe. It's redacted.inc.
Hey, also tell them about the store. Tell them about the store as well.
I'm working on that. Okay, yes. Also, you can find Redacted merchandise if you'd like to see that under the tree for a loved one. You can find that at redactedstore.com. You can find the non-pacifist peace extremist. That's a festive one to wear this Christmas. Check out the rest of our merchandise there, redactedstore.com. All right, we'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.